Today I'll be showing you how I painted a Blood Angel to a pretty decent standard very easily, and how you can do it too. I started off with a black undercoat because I wanted a bit of a darker red. I used Sanguine Scarlet from Two Thin Coats to block in all the red. It did take a couple of layers to cover, so I guess the name isn't just a fancy gimmick. This red's really great, it's the one I had to hand, but if I was using the Citadel equivalent it would be Mephiston red. Next I painted all the crotch belts and the pouches with cuirass leather. The Citadel equivalent would be Mornfang brown. Usually I just paint my Blood Angels red and black, so I paint all the pouches black and the chest eagle black, but this time I wanted to try something a bit different. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever painted a Blood Angel, if you've got a full army of them even, and what your recipe is, because I love learning new things. The chest eagle's next, and I wanted to try gold for this. I've previously shied away from using too much gold on my Blood Angels because I felt it was a wee bit too ostentatious, but now I'm questioning all my life choices because the gold looked amazing. The dragon gold was a bit watery to start with, and I was worried that it wouldn't be up to it, but a quick shake and that sorted it right out, and the gold looks fantastic going down. It coats really well, it's really smooth, and I love it. It will probably be my go-to gold from now on. I guess Retributor armour would work just as well, but dragon gold seems especially nice to me. There are tons of other details around the model that can be picked out in gold as well. There's a reliquary on his belt, and there is a design on his shoulder. There's other tiny little skulls that could be gold as well. It's very unlikely you'll be painting this exact model, so just use your best judgment on it. Dragon Fang, not to be confused with Dragon Gold, is a 1-to-1 Xandri Dust replacement, so it works for Purity Seals, Parchment and Skulls. As well as being impressed with the golds in the Two Thin Coats range, I also used the silver, which was Surcoat Silver I believe, for all the metal bits. It goes on really smoothly, it's a lovely silver. It's quite new to me though, so when you get a new pot of lead belcher it goes on really well, and then as it ages it gets clumpier and clumpier and then becomes an absolute disaster, so that might happen with these paints as well. But for the moment it's covering really nicely. The skin on the Blood Angel, which is always a sticking point for me, I prefer my Blood Angels helmeted because they get fangs and stuff that they're trying to hide, but for this guy I decided to do an unhelmeted head. And I'm quite glad I did, because the dwarven flesh covered really well over the black undercoat. It probably took 2 coats and it just looked opaque. It was very smooth, really covered nicely, so I just painted that all over the skin. It took a few coats, but there was no undercoat showing through at the end, which is what you want. If you were doing it with Citadel, I guess KDA flesh tone would be the equivalent. It's at this point in the model that I usually realise that I've missed a ton of details on it, either accidentally or deliberately, because maybe I've not decided on a colour for it yet, so I went back and blocked in all the things I'd missed, like the sword hilt, which is gold, the sword pommel, which is also gold, the sword handle, which is sword hilt burgundy, which is a bit on the nose, but that's instead of screamer pink. I normally do all my sword handles in screamer pink anyway, so this is perfect. I also hadn't done the wax on the purity seals, so I just did that sword hilt burgundy as well. Even after the base coats, without any washes or anything, you could probably see your Space Marine coming to life if you've been careful enough and you've gone back and tidied up mistakes. If you get red where it's not meant to be, or you get black where it's not meant to be, you need to go back and cover it up, because these are the little details that will make people look at your model and think, oh, it's okay, but it could have been better. The reason I know that is because I've left mistakes in plenty of times, and people with digital photography will just pinch and zoom straight to the bit that you are feeling guilty about because you know you've mucked it up. So if you go back and clean up as many of your mistakes as possible, then it'll look a lot better. Now on to the washing stage, and nothing here is groundbreaking, nothing here is different from any of my other videos. We're just going to wash everything. The gold will be washed with Flesh Wash or Reichland Flesh Shade. The silver will be washed with either Oblivion Black Wash from Two Thin Coats or Nuln Oil, both almost the same. We need to take a bit more time over the armour because it's such a focal point, so we're going to do a pin wash with a Battle Mud Wash or Agraxir Shade. You might hear people talking a lot about pin washing or panel lining when it comes to Space Marines, and all it is running a little bit of wash into the corners where 2 armour panels meet, and if you do that over the whole model it'll really add some contrast, it'll look great. If you do what I used to do, which was slap on wash onto all the flat armour panels, what you will have to do after that is get the base coat and paint the armour panels again, which is such a waste of time. If you just concentrate on the recesses, you can save so much of your valuable time. I've got a tendency to go a wee bit overboard with the wash sometimes, so all you do is get a bit of the base coat and try to straighten it up so it's just a little line in the corner. You don't want a big blob of wash about that thick, because that'll look bad as well. One thing I'll say about the flesh wash is that it doesn't seem to stain as much as Reichland flesh shade, so it was absolutely ideal for the face. It just went into the recesses and left the higher portions of the face unstained, so that saved a step as well. It brought out a lot of detail without changing the skin tone. Parchment skulls and hair were all washed over with battle mud. All the burgundy bits were washed over with Oblivion Black Wash or Nuln Oil. So it's pretty much exactly the same as the Citadel system. It would be Screamer Pink with Nuln Oil on top of it. So we're making good progress and our little guy's actually looking a bit like a Blood Angel, so that's great. Before we continue, I'd just like to say, if you're enjoying my videos, maybe you could think about liking and subscribing. It really does help the channel out. Thanks. The next step, and it's one of the steps that I feel adds the most to a Space Marine, is edge highlighting. Edge highlighting might look like a bit of a daunting technique. It seems like there's a lot of work involved, and yes, there is a lot of work involved, but that's what you have to do if you want a nice looking miniature. The actual technique is actually a lot easier than you might think it would be. All you do is get a bit of thin paint on the side of your brush, angle your model correctly, and just run the paintbrush up and down the panel until you get a nice solid line just on the edge. You've probably heard that advice a million times before, but that is because it works. If you manage to get a thin line, don't be tempted to go over it and try to accentuate it, because you'll probably make the line far too thick, and then you'll have to go back with the base coat and tidy it up. I know, because I've done that loads of times. I've thought the highlight isn't bright enough, so I've gone over it again, and usually made a pig's ear out of it. I used very thin Demon Red or Evil Sun's Scarlet for the first highlight, and I just used that method of line highlighting using the edge of my brush. If I had to use the tip, I was just very careful, and I did have to go back and tidy up quite a lot. You should try to pick out as many edges as possible, because the more you get, the better it looks. For the leather pouches, I just used exactly the same technique as the armour with the edge of the brush, and I used boar hide from Two Thin Coats, or Scrag Brown I think would be the equivalent from Citadel, and I was just very careful, picked out all the edges. After that I used Elven Flesh, stroke Kislev Flesh, on all the high areas of the face. I used it on the cheekbones, the nose, the forehead, and I just tried to leave as much flesh wash in the recesses as I could, so that it created a bit of depth. Faces are not my strong point, but with these paints it seems pretty easy to get a good result, so I was happy to leave it where I left it. For the hair, it's actually really flat, so I tried to add a bit of texture to it. I used Skeleton Legion and just painted little lines on it to try to give a bit of hair texture, and I actually think it worked out quite well. I would do that again definitely. It's not perfect, but it does look pretty good. I highlighted the gold next with glistening gold. I think the Citadel equivalent would be Liberator Gold, so use one of them. Liberator Gold is not my favourite paint. It's quite thin, it doesn't last very long, it's probably very nice out of a new pot, but I just think glistening gold is a nicer paint overall, and I got really nice results on the chest eagle and all the other gold bits with it, so I think that'll be my new gold combo going forward. The parchment highlights were Skeleton Legion and then Vampire Fang, and all the metal was highlighted with plate armour. I thought the armour could use something a bit extra at this point. It was a little bit too safe. It looked good, but it didn't look great. So I used Orange Flare, which is like Fire Dragon Bright, on all the sharpest corners and all the sharpest edges, and I think that really added something, so I'm very happy I did it. There was nothing tricky on this model. I only used basic techniques to get to this point, and I've got a model that I am actually very proud of. The main techniques I used were patience, tidying up my mistakes, and edge highlighting. If you enjoyed this and you're looking for something else to watch, I'd recommend this one. Cheers!